again, welcome everybody. My name is Margot Lehman. I'm a member of Sandy Spring Friends Meeting, and I'm glad to welcome you here. I'm also really pleased to welcome Councilmember Evan Glass. You may have suspected that he's here because there's like brochures all over the place, right? We had Evan Glass here before to talk to us on a number of subjects. He has been a council member since 2019, serving Montgomery County. He was formerly a journalist before that, and he is currently running for county executive. Today, we have invited on Friends in Unity with Nature has invited Evan Glass to come talk about the initiatives in Montgomery County around native plants, all with this goal of fighting climate change and Montgomery County being a leader in that area. So I'm going to turn this over to Councilmember Glass. There will be plenty of opportunity to ask questions, and I'm going to ask you to please wait until you get handed a microphone, because otherwise we will not be able to hear you.
Well, thank you, Margot, for the wonderful introduction and for the invitation to return. It's always good to be with friends, and the food smells incredible. And so you're going to have me work up an appetite for the next half hour or so, and I look forward to joining you for a meal. But it is always wonderful to be up here, to be with you, and to be in Sandy Spring, one of my favorite corners of Montgomery County. And I brought a special guest today because while we're talking about plants and nature, I thought that I might get some very tough questions about our plants and about flora and fauna. And I brought a senior horticulturalist at Montgomery Parks, who works at Brookside Gardens, who happens to be my husband, Jason Goodnight. I might talk a little bit, but I suspect some of your questions, I'm gonna phone a friend, and Jason might be able to help you. But you got a real horticulturalist here. A few years ago, about 20 years ago, Jason and I were living in downtown Silver Spring, and it was right when Discovery Channel had just popped up. So Silver Spring was on the rise. Thousands of new people were moving into the community. And we got together with some neighbors and we're talking about how it was becoming a concrete jungle and we needed some gardening. We needed some outdoor activity. And we talked about creating a community garden. And now there was no parkland in downtown Silver Spring where we were. And so we were trying to figure out where to create that community garden. And there was a piece of property that was privately owned. And I spoke to the property owner and I said, could we borrow part of your land so that the community could put a garden here? And the property owner said, sure. And then we spoke with our then council member at the time, Valerie Irvin, if you remember her. And we spoke with the Parks Department. And in a short amount of time, we got the King Street Community Garden open and operating. It was about 22 plots, and it was the very first public-private community garden in Montgomery County because it was on private land, but they provided it for free to the county. And so while I was the one who did the legislative work, the regulatory work, the political work to make that happen, once we got it open, Jason took over and essentially became the chief gardener, giving everyone seedlings that he had grown in our apartment, would be across the street, helping people plant and water. And it was a wonderful convening of our community. And that was years and years before I ever ran for office, got elected to office. And so those are my roots, literally and figuratively, in the community, starting a community garden. But since I joined the council 8 years ago, I've been on the Transportation and Environment Committee, and recognizing that we are in a climate crisis is incredibly important. And while we have, allow me to be a little political here, while we have a president who is invading now multiple countries, trying to take their oil, and trying to deny climate change, it is all the more reason that we here in Montgomery County and the state of Maryland need to do everything we can to provide a greener and cleaner future for our kids. The work that I've been doing first was community garden, tree stewardship, making sure we planted more trees as we cut them down to build homes, to build office buildings. You know, we have to replace 2 trees for every one that's cut down. And since serving on the council, I've also expanded composting opportunities. There's a number of pilot programs throughout Montgomery County, depending on the community, that you can do residential composting. So any leftover food that isn't provided, if someone doesn't take it home, we could compost that, because about 25% of all the waste that we send to the trash heap in Montgomery County is food. So we need to do more composting. And all of that work was recognized by former President Biden, who appointed me to an EPA work group called the Local Government Advisory Committee. There are about 25 leaders from around the country who provided guidance to the Biden administration, who was the greenest president of our lifetime, at least a generation. And it was an honor to serve with leaders from across the country. You know, the committee still exists. Thankfully, EPA still exists, but we have not met since November of 2024 for understandable reasons, which is, again, all the more reason why local environmental leadership is critically important. And I share that as background because I walk the walk, and we live in a home where we do composting, where Jason takes care of outdoor and indoor plants to make sure that they are native, to make sure that they're beautiful. And, you know, couples, especially sometimes political couples, they talk a lot about how they're going to help their community. But I think we're the only ones who talk about plants, you know, when we're laying in bed and trying to make sure that we have a natural environment that protects all species and protects humanity. And it's why last year I introduced 2 pieces of legislation that collectively we've called the Native Plant Protection Act. The Native Plant Protection Act. It does 2 things essentially. One, it prohibits the sale of invasive bamboo in Montgomery County. I didn't realize how people felt about invasive bamboo until I started researching this legislation. And then I learned there are a lot of people who hate bamboo in Montgomery County because it was planted probably by a neighbor with very good intentions, and now it has taken over everyone's backyards or front yards. And so the one half of the legislation prohibits the sale of invasive bamboo. We wanted to also figure out how we could remedy it, recognizing that for some homeowners, it is a real problem, but it is really expensive to fix. And I did not want to overburden either homeowners or neighbors by having them pay thousands of dollars to help remedy it. So the best thing that we're doing right now is prohibiting the sale. This legislation will actually come up for a vote in the beginning of March. So help is on the way. I would normally say get your bamboo before it becomes spam, but don't get your bamboo. Let it die, right? But that will happen in March. And so we will become the first county in the state of Maryland to prohibit the sale of invasive bamboo, otherwise known as running bamboo. The other half of the legislation is a little more tricky. I wanted to make sure that we protect our birds and our bees and other native species. And we've seen what's happened to the bee colonies. We've seen what's happening to birds and other species, because as we're continuing to grow, we are losing their natural habitats. And so I introduced a zoning measure. It's called a zoning text amendment, but it's a zoning measure that would require 50% of all new open space in communities. So when you build a new apartment, when you build new townhomes, when you build new single-family homes, there's a lot of public space. What the zoning measure would do is require that 50% of that public space be native. So not turf, not short grass, not, imported trees that look pretty, but are not native. And I wanted to make sure that that was a way that we could protect our birds, our bees, and all other insects and living creatures. We had a committee session on it, and it got put into a drawer. A number of my colleagues didn't like the idea of requiring communities to do certain things with their property. And they thought that it might come at the expense of other types of amenities, whether it's turf grass, a playground, or something else. I didn't view it as a cut and dry black and white situation, but enough of my colleagues had some questions. So that piece of legislation does not seem like it's going to be moving forward. If it's something that you support, we can talk afterwards, and I would encourage you to write to my colleagues and encourage them to pass the zoning measure that would require more native plants in Montgomery County. But of these two pieces, one is moving forward, that is the bamboo ban that will happen in March. And there's a lot more that we have to do. I'll end on this note, and then we can open it up for question. And you can ask some good questions of Jason. But I talked about trees and how trees are really important to me. I had a committee hearing and was asking about the tree planting that Montgomery County was doing. Specifically, when developers cut down trees and have to replant them. If a developer does not want to replant a tree, they can pay into a fund, and the county will then plant those trees with that money. I learned that when we passed that piece of legislation 10 years ago, we never changed the cost of the tree, meaning inflation has eroded our purchasing power. And as a result, the Department of Environmental Protection told me that the county lost the ability to plant 10,000 trees because we weren't charging enough. So I immediately introduced and passed legislation that increased the cost of the trees when developers cut them down and indexed it to inflation so that would never be a problem again, because we cannot forego all of these trees, right? So many of us live in Montgomery County because of our beautiful environment. We need to preserve it, and that's what I've been working to do. So with that, I don't know if you want to open up for questions or.
Thank you, Delegate Glass. I'm very interested in what you had to speak about, but I'm concerned about the Maryland Israel Development Center. Now, this center promotes trade relations. That's fine. But unfortunately, much of the trade is military. And I don't think the state of Maryland should be involved when 19,000 children in Gaza have been killed, not to mention women and seniors. So, sir, I would propose, if we don't do away with the center, at least it should exclude any military trade. I would welcome your comments.
Well, thank you for that question, John. I appreciate it. We do have in Montgomery County a $7.6 billion budget, and there is a program in that budget for about $45,000 that goes towards international economic development work with the nation of Israel. That money has been in the budget for decades, and it has been unanimously approved throughout the years. Every council member has supported it, and the county executive has put it in his budget. On Friday, this upcoming Friday, the county executive is going to introduce his budget for the next fiscal year. We will see whether or not he puts it in the budget. What I do know.
Would you support excluding military trade and relations in that development center?
I've heard various things about what he's going to put in the budget, that he might change the parameters for that funding. And so what I'd love to do is, let's see what he does in the budget and see what is needed to do thereafter. Because I think there's universal agreement that we should have international economic development work in Montgomery County, the most diverse place in the country. So we want to work with other nations, but I think we need to determine what the size of those budgets are, what the parameters of that engagement is. And after he introduces the budget on Friday, let's talk and we'll see how he's structured.
Then you next.
I'm very concerned about how some of the candidates are being funded and that they will be beholding to PACs or corporations or developers, large donors. And I'm just curious about where you stand on that because I know that you are people focused, but I just wanted some specifics.
Well, thank you for that question, Nadine. I'd love to talk about plans too, but we'll talk about this, right? They're both green, I guess, right? Maybe. So what Nadine is referring to is that in this race for county executive, there are a number of us running, but only some of us are using public financing. I am very proud to be the only candidate in this race, the only council member running for county executive who has consistently rejected corporate money and political action committee money because we see the corrupting influence down in Washington, D.C. You know, we don't have Elon Musk here, but there are special interests here. And I just shared with you that one of the native plant bills I introduced got put into a drawer because there were some special interests that didn't like it. True comparison there. And I'm very proud to be running a people-centered campaign where I only accept donations from living, breathing people. 97% of whom are Montgomery County residents. That's grassroots. And so I appreciate the question because I think the policies that we all implement are shared with us and instructive of who helps fund our campaigns. And for those of you who don't have my cell phone or don't have my email, grab me afterwards. I'll gladly give it to you because ever since I've gotten elected, I am extremely responsive to residents. That's how I learned about the bamboo situation. That's why I know that people want more environmental protections. And that's what I'll do as county executive because that's what I've been doing as a council member. So thank you, Nick.
So I'm actually a resident of Howard County. My parents are about 28. Two things. So like homelessness and mental illness people, like, is there a way that you could possibly get them county jobs? It's so hard. Mentally ill people and homeless people can't get jobs. So hard. And I was thinking like, if the county could like, have a program where because they want to help so much myself. I wanted to work. So it's something maybe we look at on.
What's your name?
Christopher Purdue, I'm sorry.
Christopher, thank you. Thank you for the really thoughtful question. During my 2 terms on the council, during my first term on the council, I served on the Health and Human Services Committee and was the council's point person on issues related to homelessness and vulnerable communities. I've been to every homeless shelter in Montgomery County. I've been to every food pantry in Montgomery County. And as you know, the need is only increasing. Not only because it's even harder to afford a home in Montgomery County, but because of what Donald Trump is doing. He's actually forcing people onto the streets and forcing people in Washington, D.C. to come up Georgia Avenue and come to Silver Spring and Tacoma Park and Long Branch and Bethesda. All of those pressures are real. And I have made a focus of ensuring our social safety net be as strong as possible. I'm really proud of all of the individuals who provide homeless services in Montgomery County. It's an incredible network that we call the continuum of care. And the reason it's a continuum of care is because we recognize we need to help people get off the street. And one of the best ways to do that is by providing them housing immediately, no questions asked. We'll provide you a studio or a one-bedroom apartment. And then once you're there safely in a home, then we can help you get healthcare. We can help you get food, we can help you get a job. All of that is at risk because of Donald Trump and because of the cuts he wants to make to the housing and urban development budget. Tens of millions of dollars that we get for homeless programs here in Montgomery County are at risk. Thankfully, they haven't started just yet. But going back to the budget question, I'm going to be looking in this budget to make sure that our social safety net is as strong as possible so that we can continue providing more services for those who need it, because I think the marker of a community is how we support those least fortunate and those who are without a home, who are undergoing mental duress, who need food, are certainly those we need to help the most. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, homeless is problem, because of the mental illness, a lot of times.
They are tied in many instances.
Okay, I have a plant question. So, I understand that there's also some type of invasive tree that is taking over Montgomery County. I don't know if it's like a pear, some kind of pear tree. It's one that has those pretty white flowers, but it really does seem to be taking over. And I'm just wondering, is there a corollary to the bamboo, or just like, is that a situation? I'm just curious to understand that.
So Dan, what's your name?
Tina.
Tina, thank you. So when we wanted to prohibit running invasive bamboo, we were looking at what else we could do. There are some invasives that are already on the list, and we wanted to try and do more. Sometimes we've been told that the Department of Environmental Protection doesn't have all the staff to be able to identify all of the different types of species. We need to hire different types of people, which I have no doubt. But there are some limitations to that. And so I suspect we'll continue doing more. And what we've defined as invasive is the definition of the United States Department of Agriculture for the Mid-Atlantic region. Some people wanted us to look specifically at Maryland, but as climate change occurs and topography and weather patterns change, we wanted to be very as inclusive as possible. So it goes basically from northern North Carolina all the way up through Delaware, and that's kind of the region that we're looking at. But for the very specifics of your question, I'm going to turn it over to the expert. And I've been looking forward to saying this, and maybe 2 years of me serving on the council, I'm going to hand it off to my smart husband to answer your question.
I'm not sure what more I can add. First of all, welcome everyone. I'm so happy to be here. This is my first time here, and it looks like a wonderful, loving community. So I can feel that already. So thank you. I'm not sure what more I can add to what Evan had said. The state legislature certainly every year looks at adding more and more plants to that list that are banned plants that nurseries aren't able to kind of sell, that are restricted. So certainly the Bradford pear is not something you find commonly in nurseries. It's not something that people typically purchase. But unfortunately, it's been around for decades and decades. It used to be planted as a major tree in most homeowners, also along streets, and it's invasive, so it multiplies. You'll see it all along the highways in a certain time in spring. It has the white flowers, right? It looks beautiful, but it's absolutely horrible. It just takes over. So I think the biggest lesson here, how many of you are gardeners? Wonderful. How many of you see nature and environment as part of God's creation? It's a good majority. So I would just say the way that I approach it too is I just look that I'm helping heal the earth as part of the child of God and someone who is very faithful. And so for me, when I garden, I look at how I can make that more inclusive and support wildlife. And so that's why gardening with native plants is the way to go. It makes gardening so much easier because they survive much more. They're used to evolving in this area, and they also support wildlife. So but certainly make sure that when you're at these nurseries and stores, do a little research before you go and just make sure that you're buying native. It's the best way to go. So.
Okay, so first I want to say, I want to thank the county for the support it provides to Rainscape. When we do our native plant giveaways, Tony, all these other people, it's just so, it's so wonderful we can turn to Netscape and get Brainscape and get their information and publish it. It's really great, very informative. Unfortunately, many of their flyers and documentation went to National Park Service sites that no longer exist. And so, I hope someone can look at that and recognize that, it was just sort of literally just turn the lights off. So that's a comment, but I really appreciate it.
Yep.
I do have a real question for you there. And it's a bit of a twist, like, it's a bit of a twist. You're getting oddball questions. Here's another oddball question related to both part of the term. Do you or the community have a position on the use of cannabis by first responders in off-duty status? I understand that's a big fight that's happening over in Annapolis. Just wondering what your thoughts on it.
So if you can hear the question, it is about public safety personnel using cannabis when they're not on the job. State law currently prohibits that, right? It's a state law. I have spoken with our police department and our firefighters about that. I have shared with them my thoughts that it's hard to justify its legal use, but prohibit it from people using in their personal capacity, just like alcohol, right? Alcohol is legal, they can use that when they're off duty. Cannabis is legal, but they're prohibited from using it. That is a state issue. I don't know where the state legislation is, if there is any state legislation on that, but I have personally spoken with both our firefighters union and our police union about it, and said I think the inconsistencies in state law are confusing.
And I know many of you have questions, but I'm gonna sneak one in here since I got on my own. And keep us on plants. As a homeowner who's trying to wild my yard, and I have a neighbor who doesn't like that, I am wondering if on a county level, if there already is legislation that gives me some coverage, or could there be? I was saved, he actually called the county on me, and I have to say that they did great. They called me and I explained to them what I was doing, but it was the State Department of Natural Resources that came to my aid, because I was able to point to their website where they are talking about citizens putting in backyard meadows and that sort of thing. So this may actually be for both of you, is that, are there parameters that I should stick to as somebody who is trying to turn my yard into my little 1 acre into a haven? Is there legislation that gives me coverage when my neighbors say they don't like it?
So thank you for that, because that is an aspect of the legislation that will be passing in March that I omitted. So it prohibits running bamboo, and it allows natural grasses and natural plants to grow higher than like the 4 inches that is currently allowed. It'll actually allow it to grow up to a foot or 2, I believe, maybe 18 inches. Front yards and backyards. By making sure that public safety and public health are also preserved. The Department of Environmental Protection actually pushed back quite strenuously against it, saying that they did not have the staff who would be able to recognize what native grasses are. And then also there was a thought that vermin, for lack of a better term, might be able to live in those environments, causing public safety concerns. We worked through the legislation. We quite frankly dismissed some of those concerns, but recognized that if there is any public health, if there are vermin, it would allow the county to come and clear that growth, understandably so. But native plants need to grow to their native height. And in order to do the work that we want them to do of attracting birds and bees and insects, they do have to grow higher than the artificial length height that we've reduced them to. So that will be part of the March legislation too.
Just a minute.
Yes.
The realization I'm having is that education is
the answer to a great deal of this stuff. And adults that have land or are interested in creating gardens, food bearing gardens, need to be educated. So what is the county doing to help promote an understanding of soil science, of vermiculture, of all the things that are going to nutrify our food that comes from, so we don't have to rely on the healthcare system, which isn't exactly working.
Yeah, that's right. I love the question, and you're right. It is about education. Sometimes people are fearful of grasses and plants that they don't know, but also we have to help people who just need a little assistance. We have an Office of Food Resilience in Montgomery County, which is an agency that basically helps people it helps farmers markets, it helps with food that's grown in the ag reserve, but also there are grants for local gardens, and also there are educational opportunities for those who want to learn more. I'm going to turn it over to Jason to talk about his work and ways that you all who are interested in learning more to empower yourself, to educate yourself. Jason runs a bunch of programs with Brookside Gardens and Montgomery Parks as well.
I love the question, and I completely agree. So my title is actually Adult Education Manager for Montgomery Parks, which is a county organization agency, even though I'm a senior horticulturalist there. So I can at least speak on behalf of Montgomery Parks and what we're doing. And so my entire role is to help educate homeowners and landscape professionals too, to garden more sustainably, to garden past and beyond just gardening for pretty flowers and aesthetics. So that's gardening to support wildlife, create local habitats, but also gardening for self-sustenance, which is for food. So we have a lot of different programs at Brookside Gardens that help understand aspects of that. And we're slowly starting to do more about food. In the past, to be honest, vegetable gardening has not been the most popular topic amongst homeowners because they think they know how to do that, or it's too much work to do it. It's a lot of time and investment to grow your own vegetables versus going to the store, even though it's so much better for the environment to have them in your backyard. But food forests is a concept. Have you heard of the concept of food forests? Right, so it's everything from having a fruit tree in your backyard to having sort of understory bushes like blueberries or so that might produce food, and integrating them into your own backyard. You don't always need a really large one. We have food forests at Brookside Gardens. That every year we're adding more and more shrubs and trees. We're starting to do tours on them. So I certainly encourage you to go to brooksidegardens.org, and all of our programming is there. Everything from, creating a native plant container garden in your backyard or on your porch to food gardening too. So at least I can speak for Montgomery Parks. We're really committed to it. We also have the nature centers. There's a lot of nature centers throughout the county that have native plant sales, and Brookside Gardens native plant sale is going to be mid-April too. We grow at Pope Farm about 60,000 native plants every year that we use both in the park system and that we sell to the public. And so that's just we collect local ecotypes, which is the local seeds and genetics from our area. So lots of wonderful things we're trying to do to support that, but certainly food and food forests is kind of an up and coming topic that you'll see a lot more for the park. So at least I can say we're trying, and we'll certainly do more. Cultivate Magazine is just a biannual magazine that we put out that has all of our program guides and all the classes. A lot of stuff in person and virtually as well. So.
Hi. I have a question kind of that I hope involves both of you.
Okay.
My understanding of Montgomery County is that it is one of the wealthiest in the United States, and that it is one of the most diverse in the United States. The result of that is that all of us have lovely lawns, and we do not take care of them. We hire it done. And we hire it done by immigrants, many of whom do not have papers. I can count on all my fingers and toes people I know personally who don't have papers. What is Montgomery County's position? I understand it's changing at the moment. What is Montgomery County's position about ICE, immigration, et cetera? This meeting has been very supportive of the Afghan community that came here 4 years ago. Many of whom have been unable to get papers, can't get through the line. Talk to me.
Thank you for that question. Incredibly relevant and timely and tying it into everything that we're talking about. I appreciate that. First and foremost, we are doing everything we can to protect our beautiful diversity. So many of us have moved to Montgomery County and have chosen to live in Montgomery County because of that diversity. And you're absolutely right. We are the most diverse place in the country. 4 of the 10 most diverse communities in America are here. Germantown, Gaithersburg, Rockville, and Silver Spring. 4 of the 10 most diverse communities. And according to Pew, we're the most religiously diverse county as well. We love our diversity. And it is all under threat right now because of Donald Trump. Full stop. He is trying to change everything about Montgomery County, not only decimating our federal workforce, eradicating public health and education, but scaring our neighbors. There are thousands of our neighbors who are scared to go to school, who are scared to go to work because of their documentation. There are families who have fled Montgomery County to go to Portugal and Ireland because they fear for their trans child's life. And we have to do everything we can to make sure people feel welcome, safe, and seen here. I think the last time I came to meet with you all and to talk with you all was to talk about the anti-hate task force that I had created 3 years ago, which we need to revive because hate is on the rise.
Yeah.
Don't go on my Facebook page. It's terrible. But to the point that you made, we just signed into law 2 weeks ago, the Trust Act. And what the Trust Act does is rebuild trust in our community by letting our immigrant neighbors know that we will not cooperate with ICE. Our police department will not help ICE. And if anybody fears for their public safety, their personal safety, they should call our police department and they will not report anybody. They will help people where they're at. We will not cooperate with ICE. And I just this last Tuesday, introduced legislation called the ICE Out Act. The ICE Out Act. And what that does is it will prohibit privately opened detention centers from opening in Montgomery County. We will not let ICE open detention centers in Montgomery County. We see what's happening in jurisdictions all across America, even here in Maryland, over in Hagerstown. And we're being proactive in saying not here. And what it will do is prohibit and prevent the permitting department from issuing them occupancy permits and building permits. We can use permitting in a lot of different ways. We aren't giving it to ICE. We aren't building any detention centers here, and we aren't cooperating between police department and ICE. And so we're doing everything that we can. The state is also doing everything that they can, and we need to continue making sure that Montgomery County protects our diversity, welcomes our diversity, and ensures that we are a beacon of love and light from people all around the country and all around the world.
Thank you.
Hello, yeah, I have a question about environment future in general, as well as an ag preserve. I'm concerned because so many companies have their eye on the ag preserve. It's an open space, and it's supposed to be an open space, and now we've got solar farms going in. It's contradictory. And data centers want to be there now. I'm concerned about data centers. They impact our future environment, our water, our air, demand for energy. And after I heard that you were going to be here today, actually came across my union of concerned scientists magazine, and they have something about data centers and lots of aspects of having a data center to consider, let alone a energy bill going up, but the fact that they're so damaging to our environment, and I sure don't want them in the ag preserve. We need to fight hard to keep the camel's nose from under the tent, because once you let these things in, everybody has a rationale for getting in. So I'd like to share this with you because it also gives a link to more information, scientific facts that might help, because I think the state obviously is going to have to make policies and laws. And we need to have those policies and laws vetted, confirmed by scientists, and put in place before we allow any data centers in Montgomery County or anywhere near us for that matter. So I wanted to share this with you because it does have a link at the very end. And I have other copies if anybody else would like some, because it was eye-opening to me. So I thought maybe somebody else would enjoy it too.
Well, thank you. I look forward to reading it. I do love the research that the Union of Concerned Scientists have done. History has proven them being on the leading edge, and they are right. Sometimes they're ahead of their time, but that's what education is for. So thank you, Jason has it. So thank you. And just as I shared the legislation I introduced just last week about ICE, we actually have a hearing tomorrow on legislation I introduced about data centers. So tomorrow at 9:30 in the morning, there will be a committee session that I will chair and a colleague of mine will chair. The Transportation and Environment Committee and Economic Development Committees are having a hearing on my legislation to create a task force, a data center task force for Montgomery County. Now, let me take a step back. In December, there were two pieces of legislation that were introduced at the council. Three of my colleagues introduced a zoning proposal to allow data centers in Montgomery County. Now, believe it or not, we had not defined what a data center was. So that's how they're starting to pop up. So their zoning proposal defines a data center and specifies the areas of the county where they can be built. At the same time, I introduced a task force that says we have the smartest people who live here in Montgomery County, who know how the environment needs to be protected, who know how our utility rates are continuing to increase, who know how we need to put all these things together. And I think that we need to put a task force together to figure out where we should put data centers. They're two sides of the same coin, but I think they've put the cart before the horse, to mix a bunch of metaphors there, right? And their zoning proposal is not moving forward. I'm not sure why. I think we know why. But my data center task force is. It will be created with 15 committee members who represent the environmental community, who represent civic associations, who represent our utilities, our Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation, some of our businesses, and also some ombuds people who know how everyone needs to be protected. It's supposed to go for a year and then report out their findings. I think we're gonna cut that down to maybe 6 months so that they could get their report out sooner. And at the same time, you reference the state of Maryland. The state of Maryland also has a task force that they're working on for the entire state. So we're gonna make sure that we have all of this information before moving forward. Because if we do anything, it has to be right. And I think most people do recognize that there is a utility for data centers, but maybe not here, maybe not in the ag reserve, certainly not near our communities. And we certainly don't want our Petco bills to continue increasing because of the billionaires who profit off of those data centers. That's what the task force is tasked with doing. If you have nothing else better to do tomorrow at 9:30 in the morning, you can follow us on Zoom. We're on YouTube as well. But if you have additional thoughts about this, please share them, weigh in, send us emails, because we have to get this right. because the ag reserve is irreplaceable and we have to fight for it. So I appreciate that question.
On my way to the next question, I just want to echo my support for preserving the ag reserve. Speaking for my son, formerly a farmer, and we are losing farmers because it's too expensive to farm in Montgomery County.
And I don't have a few more minutes left, so okay.
Just briefly, is there continuing support at the county level for the Montgomery County Agricultural Reserve? I know that in this dynamic era of pressures to build more housing in Montgomery County, is this area under threat of development? Or is it secure, or what do we need to do to secure its continued existence? Thank you.
Great question. You hit on two things. You hit on housing affordability, and it is really expensive to live in Montgomery County. And our kids and grandkids are not able to move to Montgomery County because they can't afford it. And at the same time, preserving the ag reserve. I absolutely support preserving the ag reserve. This council supports preserving the ag reserve. When there have been housing proposals that have come up over the years, none of them have included building in the ag reserve. So hopefully that's reassuring to know. One of the things that that the ag reserve has faced questions about is more so business. There are a number of farmers who tell me that the business that they've been engaging in for decades is no longer viable. Growing crops like corn and soy is no longer viable. They can't make the same living. And so sometimes they've come to us and say, yeah, we'd love to open a distillery or a brewery, of which we have incredible ones now. But to recognize that they didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago shows that there's an evolution. But I think that those businesses reflect the best of the ag reserve. So many of them actually turn their own crops into some of my favorite drinks, right? And so we're allowing some of those farmers to use their own land in a way that supports agrotourism, and that's the term that we use, agrotourism. And at the same time, making sure we do not allow development, overdevelopment, and making sure that whatever proposals for data centers or other things, we think long and hard and have a lot of public conversation about before anything moves forward. So I appreciate that thoughtful question.
I wondered if Montgomery County has a plan for the deer population versus the native plant population, because I know in our yard, the deer eat all the native plants, or most of them that we plant.
I look at my husband because sometimes we'll walk outside the house and we'll say, the deer were here. Yeah. So it is actually the Parks Department and the Maryland, I think, Department of either Agriculture or Environment who do a culling program. Depending on where you live, there is an overpopulation. I'm an animal lover. I'm a vegetarian, so sometimes I'm conflicted about how we treat our deer population, quite frankly. And whenever I see a deer on the side of the road that's been hit, my heart drops. That's what catches me during the day. But those are always ongoing conversations about making sure that we maintain a natural habitat, because as you know, we didn't have much of a deer population decades ago. Because as Montgomery County grew and most of their habitat became housing, they were pretty much eradicated. But because of thoughtful conservation efforts, because of the way we've maintained our parks and supported native plants, they've come back. And depending on the community you live in, they might be a hindrance to some. I'm gonna call for an assist with Jason, maybe to share different types of plants or different types of gardens or ecosystems you can create that look beautiful but might not be as appetizing.
I mean, part of gardening for its creation and kind of helping to establish that natural world is just accepting that wildlife is a part of the natural world and you're going to deal with deer. So there's ways to mitigate it, but you'll never be able to obviously prevent them unless you put up a huge tall fence around your yard, which is costly and sometimes unsightly. There's certain types of plant families that naturally deers do not like to eat. The mint family, there's a lot of mountain mints, beautiful mountain mints, which are native. There's about 5 or 6 different ones that do great and are wonderful for pollinators. The allium family, like onions and garlic and other things like that. There's a lot of flowers that are related to it that they don't eat. Also, texture of leaves is key for deer. If there's rough textured or kind of fuzzy, feathery texture, they usually don't like eating them. I did notice, however, that during our hard winter, we had the longest time period where we had snow on the ground since 1984. It was the longest period we had snow on the ground, basically covering a lot of the grass and covering a lot of their food sources. I noticed, and I heard from a lot of friends also out in the countryside, that the deer actually started eating things that they typically hadn't eaten before, especially younger shrubs and younger plants. I had friends with hollies that they started eating, foster hollies. The only thing they didn't eat was American hollies, which are natives. But typically, even if you have a shrub like a rhododendron that they typically don't go after, if it's a younger shrub, they will go after. So you can certainly fence that until those trees or shrubs get a little bit more mature. But again, if you have more sensitive natives that you want to protect, put them at the back of the bed and maybe put things at the front that they either don't eat or that you're happy to have as sacrificial plants. But ultimately you can't really control. They also like to kind of eat the newer, younger shrubs. Same with bunny rabbits too. I have a lot of like shrubs like asters or so as they come up. Their tenderness, their tender, tips are really appealing, but after a certain height, they can't reach them. And after they kind of get a little bit hardened, they're not gonna be as edible. So, but just plan ahead, but you can't really eliminate the deer, that's for sure.
Well, thank you, council member.
One election.
Appreciate it. And Jason, thank you very much for coming and talking to us about this today. There are flyers all around. If you have further questions on any topic, we wandered away from plants a little bit today. Then I'm sure that Evan will be glad to answer those questions for you. And if you have any questions about Sandy Spring Friends meeting, please tag me or Jim Webner or any other members can wave their hands. And thank you. And there's a plate for you over there. And if you need to take it with you, that's good because then you'll have to come back.
There we go. Well, I always love coming back to talk about all the various issues that you all care about, but it speaks to how complex life is here in Montgomery County, right? We got a $7.6 billion budget. We have 1.1 million people in the most diverse community. And it is an honor serving you all for the last 2 terms as a council member. And I hope you recognize that these are complex issues. We need people who are able to get things done, who are able to pass legislation on things from plants and natives to ICE immigration, to making our roads safer, everything in between. And I appreciate you all coming for today's conversation. And you should all know how to reach me, take a flyer, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. So thank you all and have yourselves a wonderful Sunday.
Thanks for watching our video. For more content from Sandy Spring Friends Meeting, click to subscribe.